Chapter 6. States won by the new ruler's own forces and abilities. In the following discussion dealing with states where both the ruler and the form of government are entirely new, no one should be surprised if I choose to cite the most impressive examples. The fact is that although people almost always proceed by imitation, following in another man's footsteps, you can never tread a model's path or reproduce his qualities exactly. So, if you're sensible, you set out to follow a trail blazed by someone who was truly great, someone really worth imitating, so that even if you're not on the same level yourself, at least you'll reflect a little of his brilliance. It's like the clever archer who senses that his target is too far off, knows the limitations of his bow, and so aims for higher than he normally would, not because he really wants his arrow to go that high, but to have it fall from a height on to his target. So let's start by saying that when it comes to entirely new regimes, where a new ruler has seized the state, the ease or difficulty of his staying in power will be in proportion to his abilities or failings. And since you can't go from being an ordinary citizen to a ruler without either talent or favorable circumstances, we must suppose that one or the other of these factors will be offsetting, at least in part, a great many difficulties. That said, those who haven't relied too much on lucky circumstances have lasted longer. Another positive factor is that since in this case the ruler doesn't already possess another state, he will be forced to live in his new territory. But to turn to those who became rulers through their own qualities rather than by luck, no doubt the most impressive are Moses, Cyrus, Romulus, Theseus, and such like figures. And though we can hardly say much about Moses, since he merely carried out God's orders, all the same, we have to admire him for the grace that made him worthy of God's attention. But let's look at Cyrus and other men who have won and founded kingdoms. We'll find they are all admirable, and when we look into the specific actions each took and the institutions they established, we'll see they don't differ that much from what Moses did under divine guidance. Analyzing their lives and achievements, we notice that the only part luck played was in giving them an initial opportunity. They were granted the raw material and had the chance to mold it into whatever shape they wanted. Without this opportunity, their talent would have gone unused, and without their talent, the opportunity would have gone begging. So, if Moses hadn't found the people of Israel in Egypt, enslaved and oppressed, and in need of a leader to get them out of the situation, they would have never been willing to follow him. If Romulus hadn't been abandoned at birth and chosen to leave Alba Longa, how could he have become king and founder of Rome? If Cyrus hadn't found the Persians ready to rebel against the occupation of the Medes, and the Medes undisciplined and effeminate after a long period of peace, he couldn't have achieved what he did. And Theseus could hardly have shown his qualities if the Athenians hadn't first been defeated and dispersed. These opportunities made these men's fortunes, and it was because of their remarkable qualities that they were able to recognize and grasp the opportunities, bringing glory and even greater good fortune to their countries. These men and others like them who rise to sovereignty through their own abilities face all kinds of difficulties when setting up their states, but then hold on to them fairly easily. The initial difficulties depend in large part on the fact that in order to establish their government and guarantee its security, they have to impose a new administrative system and new procedures. Here we have to bear in mind that nothing is harder to organize, more likely to fail, or more dangerous to see through than the introduction of a new system of government. The person bringing in the change will make enemies of everyone who was doing well under the old system, while the people who stand to gain from the new arrangements will not offer wholehearted support, partly because they are afraid of their opponents, who still have the laws on their side, and partly because people are naturally skeptical. No one really believes in change until they've had solid experience with it. So, as soon as the opponents of the new system see a chance, they'll go on the offensive with the determination of an embattled faction, while its supporters will offer only half-hearted resistance, something that will put the new ruler's position at risk too. To get a better grasp of the problem, we have to ask, is the leader introducing the changes relying on his own resources, or does he depend on others? To get a better grasp of the problem, we have to ask, is the leader introducing the changes relying on his own resources, or does he depend on other people's support? That is, does he have to beg help to achieve his goals, or can he impose them? If he's begging help, he's bound to fail and will get nowhere. But if he's got his own resources and can impose his plans, then it's unlikely he'll be running serious risk. This is why the visionary who has armed force on his side has always won through, while unarmed, even your visionary is always a loser. Because on top of everything else, we must remember that the general public's mood will swing. It's easy to convince people of something, but hard to keep them convinced. So when they stop believing in you, you must be in a position to force them to believe. Moses, Cyrus, Theseus, and Romulus couldn't have got people to respect their new laws for long if they hadn't possessed armed force. We saw what happened in our own times to Girolamo Savonarola. He was overthrown along with all his reforms when people stopped believing in him. He had no way of keeping the initial believers on board or forcing the skeptical to see the light. But any new ruler bringing in changes will have to deal with huge obstacles and dangers, mostly in the early stages, and must overcome them with his own abilities. Once he's done that and eliminated those who resented his achievements so that people start to respect and admire him, then he can enjoy his power in safety and will live honored and fulfilled. I've mentioned 4 exceptional leaders, but now I want to bring in a lesser man, Hero of Syracuse, who nevertheless had some of the same qualities as the others and will serve as an example of a whole category. Originally an ordinary citizen, Hero became king of Syracuse. Once again, the only luck he had lay in the initial situation. Under threat from Carthage, the Syracusans elected him as their military commander, and he was so successful they then made him king. In fact, even as a private citizen, he was so capable that one writer said of him, he had all it takes to be a king except a kingdom. Hero disbanded the existing army and mustered a new one. He broke off old alliances and made new ones. That way, with his own soldiers and his own allies to support him, He had laid the foundation for building whatever he wanted. So it cost him considerable effort to establish his power, but very little to hold on to it.